Hello and welcome to the final part of my revision talk-throughs about the topic 1918 to 1939. In this video, I'm going to talk you through some of the final events in the road to war. So in this video, I'm going to talk you through all the key content you need to know about the Anschluss, about appeasement, and also about the Nazi-Soviet Pact, so you know the events, and importantly, you know the consequences of them, so you can answer your exam questions and explain your ideas. So once you've watched this a few times, do have a look out for my tutoring videos or go through my revision guide for tutoring videos in there to practice your exam questions. I'll talk you through how to answer those questions correctly and get top grades. Okay, but now over to the key knowledge. Okay, so before we crack on with the key content of these years, let's remind ourselves what Hitler's foreign policy aims were from our last video. So firstly, he wants to destroy the Treaty of Versailles as one of his big aims, which means taking back land lost and also rearming. But one of his other big foreign policy aims is the destruction of communism. So in 1936, he sets up the Anti-Comintern Pact, which is an anti-communism pact. And this is with Japan. By 1937, Italy joins the pact as well. By 1939, this German, Japanese, Italian pact becomes a pact of steel. So this essentially is an anti-communist, anti-Russian pact. So it's worth remembering this throughout this rest of this video. What's Russia thinking about the aims of Germany, Italy and Japan in its time? Because clearly they've signed a pact to destroy communism. Now over to our first big event, the Anschluss of 1938. So we might remember the Dollfuss Affair of 1934, but after this, in return for Schuschnigg agreeing to allow the Nazis to continue and maybe get involved in government, Germany promised to respect Austria's independence. But by January 1938, the Austrian police had found in a raid of Nazi offices plans to overthrow the government. So Hitler and Schuschnigg had an emergency meeting to discuss this, and they agreed that Seyss-Inquart, the Nazi leader in Austria, should be appointed the Minister of the Interior, and restrictions be lifted on Nazi activities to try and keep the peace, so they weren't being aggressive and trying to overthrow the government. Involve them in the government and there'll be peace. Also, it was agreed that as a plebiscite, a vote should take place by Austrians to decide if they wanted to join Germany and have the Anschluss. Again, this would be a final answer to the Nazi requests, and if the people didn't want it, then the Nazis would be quiet. So, however, on 11th of March 1938, Hitler demanded the plebiscite be postponed. He thought it wasn't quite organised well enough, he put across some excuses. The Austrians agreed. Hitler demanded Seyss-Inquart should therefore replace Schuschnigg as leader because of the crisis that was developing. So Seyss-Inquart was made leader at the evening of that day at 8 p.m. and he asked Germany to come and help Austria as Austria was in chaos. Now, this is a classic Hitler maneuver to try and make it look like he's being helpful, he's sorting out problems, when actually he's being aggressive. And he has obviously managed to bully the Austrians into giving over rule to the Nazis with threats in the background. So on the 12th of March, the German army invaded Austria. However, it was rushed and badly planned, disorganised, pictures of tanks in petrol stations, etc. There was no resistance from Austria, though, and in fact, many people welcomed the German army into Austria. So Austria was swallowed up by Germany, and the Anschluss had taken place to break the Treaty of Versailles even further. So what were some of the impacts and consequences of this? So Mussolini didn't object. He stuck to his Rome-Berlin axis, and this strengthened their alliance. So this highlights that now Italy and Germany are strong allies together. Russia and Czechoslovakia, of course, would be worried by this. Germany is now moving eastwards for Lebensraum and destroying more of the Treaty of Versailles. So would his next step be Poland or Czechoslovakia, perhaps? There was no reaction by the British, the French or the League of Nations. This showed the League of Nations now was powerless and useless, and it showed the British and French didn't have the confidence to stop Hitler. So if you're thinking about an explanation question about the importance of the Anschluss, these are some of your points and arguments that would be making really excellent answers. Okay, so what about appeasement then? So what are the major causes of appeasement? So here are some of them. Firstly, Britain, obviously it's their policy, were worried about war again. Obviously many people had died during the First World War, and elections in the 1930s and polls of the people suggested they didn't want war again. People in Britain, some of the politicians, did think the Treaty of Versailles was too harsh upon reflection, but some of the problems it had caused to Germany needed solving. There was, of course, an increasing fear of communism, and Germany was a strong nation against communism. The Anti-Comintern Pact, for example, people were fearful of communism, and they wanted to keep Germany on side and strong to deal with communism if that was required. Britain and France were not ready for war, so appeasement could delay or stop war altogether, give time for preparations. And finally, it was uncertain who would help Britain and France. Would the USA leave its isolation to help Britain and France against Germany? Would Russia help? And obviously, would the British Empire be strong enough, or the French Empire strong enough to help in war? So what are the key events of appeasement? So 938, we've got the Anschluss of Austria, and that leads to the next step perhaps being Czechoslovakia and the Germans who live there. Benz, the Czech leader, in response to the Anschluss, asked France for help, and France had an alliance to support Czechoslovakia, so that was re-established, and the British agreed they would help Czechoslovakia as well. In May 1938, Hitler made it clear that he wanted the 3 million Germans of Sudetenland back in Germany, and he started to prepare for war to take back that land. Czechoslovakia, however, had strong fortifications around Sudetenland, had a strong modern army, tanks, machine guns, etc., so they were willing to fight. So a major war was potentially going to happen that could drag Britain and France into it as well. So the 15th September 1938, Chamberlain decided to negotiate before going into war. He agreed with Hitler that they should have a plebiscite, a vote of the German Sudetenland to see if they wanted to rejoin Germany. Then on 19th September 1938, the vote was agreed with the Czechs, but Hitler said in this vote he wanted all of Sudetenland, not just the German areas. Chamberlain thought this was unreasonable, and the agreement was cancelled for the election, and instead Britain started to mobilise its navy and started to prepare for war. Then on the 29th September, there was a final meeting. This is the Munich meeting. And in this meeting, chaired by Mussolini, they agreed that Sudetenland was to be given to Germany. The Czechs and Russians were not consulted about this, and this was the Munich Agreement. People did not want war at this stage, and particularly Britain, France did not want war. They were willing to sacrifice Czechoslovakia to stop war. Chamberlain arrived home a hero, and he announced he had peace in our time and promises from Hitler that this was it. This is all he wanted. So on the 1st of October, Germany marched into Sudetenland and took back that area. This meant that he had broken the Treaty of Versailles again. So what were the successes and failures of appeasement? So obviously successes. Chamberlain possibly was a realist and knew this was delaying the inevitable of a war, but it gave time for rearmament in Britain. They started rearming rapidly. This gave them moral advantage to Britain and France. Well, they had tried to ensure peace. A country like America would be impressed by this and might be willing to support them in the future. They possibly been delaying war long enough again for Britain and France to prepare. That's a third idea. And fourth, it was popular in Britain. Surveys said they didn't want war still, so it was a very popular policy of appeasement. Again, this gave the moral high ground to the British people. If war should take place, they tried their best for peace. Why was it a failure? Well, appeasement was too trusting of Hitler, and it allowed him to get stronger. Appeasement had weakened Czechoslovakia, importantly, and made the invasion of Czechoslovakia really, really easy in March 1939 when Hitler finally invaded all the land. All the fortifications were in the Sudetenland, so there's video reels of the German army pointing out all the fortifications they had taken in peaceful circumstances, whereas if they'd invaded it would be a lot more difficult. Appeasement gave Germany more time to rebuild their army as well, not just the French and British. By 1939 they had 1 million trained soldiers, 8,000 military aircraft. Also, it gave Hitler more confidence that he could take more. He didn't think the Allies were going to stop him, so he invaded Czechoslovakia in March 1939, and then he wanted Poland, and this would obviously lead to the ultimatum for war in our timeline of events. Finally, going back to Russia, this upset and isolated Russia. Russia was not involved in the negotiations, even though it's creeping towards Russian land. Stalin felt this was a purposeful policy of pushing Germany eastwards towards a war with Russia. So obviously this failure of appeasement is one of the key causes of the Nazi-Soviet Pact. So what were the causes of the Nazi-Soviet Pact? Well, firstly, Germany and Russia both hated the creation of Poland and wanted it to be destroyed. They made agreements in the 1920s, the Rapallo Treaty in 1922 and the Treaty of Berlin, and this showed they could get on with each other. And of course they had this shared hatred of the setting up of Poland and taking their land. So a French and Russian alliance was one of the other causes. USSR made an alliance against Germany in 1934, but when Germany took the Rhineland in 1930 and France did nothing, Stalin became worried. So he started to feel the French and Russian alliance was weak, and the French weren't able to do anything, and they were not the great alliance partner he maybe should have. So appeasement is another cause. Lord Halifax and Neville Chamberlain had hated communism, and Stalin believed that 1938 agreement was to push Germans into Lebensraum in the east. And finally, the failed alliance with Britain. Britain tried to negotiate an alliance with Russia in April 1939. Reginald Drax was sent, but negotiations were slow, and neither seemed to trust each other. So again, Russia had to look for a more realistic answer. France was a weak alliance partner. Britain didn't seem that interested. A realistic response for the Russians was to try and negotiate with Germany. So they started to organise this Nazi-Soviet Pact. In April 1939, Hitler abandoned Germany's non-aggression pact with Poland and announced that he wanted Danzig and the Polish corridor back. France and Britain responded with an ultimatum of war if Germany invaded Poland. Hitler did not want a two-front war, the West and the East, due to just about Poland, so he started negotiating with the Russians. In the summer of 1939, Ribbentrop and Molotov met. Now, the Nazi-Soviet Pact is also called the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. Okay, so obviously that could be something you see in the textbooks or exam questions as well. It was signed on 24th of August 1939. The pact agreed that Germany and Russia would divide Poland between them and not attack each other. Stalin did not believe Hitler would keep his word. Obviously, he was a realist as well. This would give him time to rebuild and give him a buffer zone against a future attack by the Germans. So what was the impact of this Nazi-Soviet pact? So on the 27th of August, Hitler announced that he would invade Danzig in the Polish corridor if it was not surrendered to him. The Allies repeated their ultimatum for war. So consequently, Hitler, now having the confidence to invade, knowing Russia will not attack, and he invaded Poland on the 1st of September, and the Second World War began. Sorry to interrupt this video, but I just thought I'd tell you quickly about my revision guides as well. So they have lots of videos like this that tell you about the content, but importantly they have tutoring videos in there as well. So no more spending huge amounts of money on private tutors. You can have a look at my revision guide, and it has lots of tutoring videos on how to help. Have a look through YouTube. There's a few there for free to use. There's more in the revision guides. So do have a look in the comments to find out more. So I hope you found that useful, and it gives you the full story now of the 1918 to 39 cause of the Second World War, the failures of the peace, so you know the whole story from my videos now. If you're interested, then do have a look through my YouTube channel, and there'll be some videos about tutoring you how to answer questions, and do look out for my revision guide as well. Right, bye for now.